welcome to the session. I'm going to present. Okay. So I'm going to start again. I'm going to give you some information about our EU Net ADB study. This project acronym stands for European Net Addictive Behavior Among Minors. And the first thing I want to do is that I show you our consortium that was working for about now close to 2 years on this project. This project was coordinated by our Greece partner, the Adolescent Health Unit. They were responsible for overall project management and for the quantitative approach that was used within the study. Our partner from Spain, Protegolas, is responsible for quality assessment of this project, and NFC, Nobel Children Foundation, is responsible for dissemination. And the University Medical Center Mainz was responsible for work package lead in regard to the qualitative study, what I'm going to present to you today. Of course, all the other partners put a lot of effort in this project, and the very rich information that we gathered here, they were responsible for gathering the information that we needed and that we used for the analysis of our study, such as the quantitative and the qualitative approach, but I'll go on to that later on. Well, first of all, I want to give you an outline about the upcoming presentation. I'm going to give you one very specific quote about what we are talking about. I'm not going to read every quote, but I'm going to read particular parts of the quote so that the Polish-speaking people that are not able to read these English quotes can understand what I want to transport here. Well, since we're talking about qualitative studies in any case, we need to decide which research approach was used, and our research approach was grounded theory. And since this was our approach, we had to have a particular focus onto procedures and rigor that was used, and later on there will be results. Well, I used to go out more, being outside, going swimming or stuff like that. I haven't been swimming for about 2 years. I haven't been out with my friend in the evening for over 4 months now. Such things you neglect. That was the first interview of a German girl. And it's not about online gambling. This picture is interesting so far. I will come to it later because she's not telling us within this quote what she's doing online, but she's telling us that she's doing something online. And that's what we were focusing on, the underlying condition of how young people are going or getting to be consumed that much with the internet and spending that much time on the internet. So our very simple question is, why? How does a specific situation look like that this child and the environment of this child lead to a situation where you can evolve such an enormous time that you spend to the internet? Well, the project was funded by the Commission in the Safer Internet Plus program, and as I told you, we have 2 pillars, a qualitative and a quantitative approach. In total, we have nearly 14,000 questionnaires all over Europe and 124 interviews. The quantitative approach, by nature of this approach, investigated for prevalences and risk factors, and the qualitative approach was focusing on underlying conditions and causal conditions, developmental trajectories that could be defined by the use of those approaches. Well, so I focus on this qualitative study, as I already told you, and I'm going to put a few words onto our sample. We interviewed 124 adolescents with an age range of 14 to 7 years, and we tried to have a similar gender allocation. And since we were using grounded theory, we decided to have theoretical sampling. This theoretical sampling was defined that our participants should score in the Internet Addiction Test by Ms. Kimberly Young 13 points equal or more than those 13 points, so that we could say that they were showing some signs of an internet addictive behavior. And the method, for sure, there was a pilot study, and we interviewed face-to-face. First, there was discussion if we would have our interviews on an online platform, but we avoided this. And those interviews were from about 40 to 50 minutes in duration. Additional questionnaires were collected, such as the assessment for computer game and internet addiction, the Youth Self-Report and the Internet Addiction Scale. And the very interesting thing here is that we use the stepwise approach of ground theory. Ground theory usually has participants in range from 20 to 40 participants. Here we do have 124. So you could ask the question, why did you ask or why did you interview so many young people? Well, the answer is very simple. We had saturation within those interviews on a European level in regard to content and information by interview of 80 to 85. But on a national level, and that's the very interesting thing about the study, because we are able to compare on the national level on levels in regard to region of Europe. And here, saturation was reached in this very late position of 124 interviews. Ground theory, as I told you, is two different, very important advantages that made us decide for this approach. The first is that you can discover underlying conditions, especially where theory is not well explored. And in regard to the development of an internet addictive behavior, the theory is actually not well explored. And this was the one point. And the other very important reason is that this is focusing especially onto contextual factors, so that you could have the environment of the child's life, family, peers, and so on. And that led to our research question, how does an internet addictive behavior develop? Since we are talking about procedure, I was asked to do this very extensive, but
more results than
okay. Ethical consideration and the process that is related to that. I'm not going into detail here, but the interesting thing is we had initial codings from all our partners, those 7 countries that participated in here, and we received those initial codings from our participants, and we condensed those. We received 1,500 initial codings, and we condensed them with a team with, at the beginning, 3 main researchers and later on 4 main researchers, counseling psychologist, developmental psychologist, and a sociologist, and later on another developmental psychologist. We grouped those up to 78 categories, which we combined within our ground theory. I'll skip Riga, since we are short in time. Those are our participant characteristics. Our participants, based on our inclusion criteria that we granted eligibility, have a mean score of 47.34 and a standard deviation of 12.9, and the mean age was 16 years. We have a very similar gender allocation, and I'm going to the first part of results. Well, the interesting thing here is what I already told you, that we have the ability of comparing not only European-wide interviews, we can compare countries with this data. And the interesting thing here is that in the northern countries of Europe, the participants got very early in touch with the internet and with computers. And if you ask them, when was the first time that you get in touch with the internet, they usually cannot tell you. This boy here could tell us, but he told us that he was playing very violent computer games with an age of 4 or 5 years. And he also was playing those games in the internet. Here we have a participant that is able to tell us that date when he first started using the internet, but this date is that early in early childhood that he just started to remember those parts. And in contrast to that, we have, for example, some quote from our Greek partner, where a participant started to use the internet with 13 years of age. But the interesting thing here is that the skill level and the knowledge that the participants do have about social networks, about sites that they use, is very similar. And if you focus on the term by Prensky, digital immigrants versus digital natives, what we felt here is that there's a need for another term, because those participants that were not born as a digital native, because they got in touch that late, but are still of a skill level of a digital native, we called this a digital transformer. and that you could contrast here from the northern to the southern states. Another very interesting thing in regard to cultural aspects was that our southern participants talked about their academic burden, and the northern participants of the study were more talking about leisure time and the time that they spend on the internet. Our core category here includes two very important directions. The one is the online position that the participant actually occupies, which means, do I feel as a blogger? Do I feel as a gamer? What is my direction? Do I need the internet for my everyday life? Or what is it that I'm aiming? And that is what we defined in offline direction. Am I thinking about my education, about upcoming degrees, about what will I do in future? We have here some very interesting line. Life doesn't come back. That's what a Greek participant is telling us in this regard. Well, so we could contrast those offline engagement and online craving. And I will just focus on two of those boxes. And it's the online craving. If it's high and your offline engagement is low, the likelihood is much increased to getting addicted. And on the other hand, you have those offline engagement is very high and an online craving that is low, so that you can come full cycle and considering change. I'm going to focus this now because especially coming full cycle is an in vivo quote that we identified from our ground theory study. Well, that's our main paradigm that we evolved. Here we have our phenomenon. Especially if you think about our participants are all very familiar with the internet and are all using the internet to a very large extent. So they are always online and checking out. If you ask them, they are telling you that they are always online, using it every day, every minute. They are online 24/7, such things they were telling us. And in relation to that, and also in relation to developmental aspects of adolescence, they have this adolescent thirst for knowledge and this quenching thirst for participating in groups, group belonging. And this group belonging is granted by specific knowledge about events, about upcoming appointments with friends. And if you have this knowledge, then you can participate. This is mediated by growing up digital. This is something that we saw at the very beginning from this German participant that even started watching his brother when he was in the age of 4 or 5 years playing violent computer games. And he noticed that that could be a source of empowerment. And the internet is offering a very enormous source of empowerment for young people because it's very easy that they could enter this source, empowering via coping with music, videos, in social networks, something like this. And that is what we assigned for judging a changing reality. Here they evolved their adaptive or maladaptive strategies of internet use, where they find situations where they can focus on online activities or on offline activities such as sports. And this is, in every case, mediated to the self-scheme of those participants. In relation to those positions of navigating, it's not necessarily conscious at the beginning, but later on they decide, in most of the cases, very conscious what they're going to do. Well, this is this coming full cycle quote. It comes full cycle, I think, and you end up not using it. That's when a participant decides, my internet use was much too extensive and I need to cut it down. And this works via this empowerment intervening condition. And in most of the cases, via the self-scheme of these participants. That's very interesting. And we have identified 3 stereotypes in here. It's one stereotype that's not telling us really why he decided to cut it down. It was just cut down because something happened or a positive event in this life happened here. The father was ill and he got everything was fine in the end, so internet consumption was cut down. Then we have those participants that are self-corrected, that they tell us, I want to cut my internet use down because I feel I'm using it too often. And a very interesting part here is also saturation, that they feel that their internet consumption is as they add the same thing all the day, and that's not very comfortable for them. Well, we have those that juggle. That's the part of the participants that are with a very high involvement offline as well as a very high online craving. And they have their responsibilities in regards to sports clubs, in regard to social networking, very communicative. And those really struggle because they want to participate in offline as well as online activities, and they are very involved here. We have those that considered the change of their use, and that's something like a previous step for coming full cycle. Here they got aware that they want to cut down their internet use, and that they drag their ass to practice because they don't want to use the internet that much. And here we have some participants that have tried unsuccessfully. And the problem about unsuccessful tries of cutting internet use down is that they always fall back into habits that they used before for coping strategies, and those habits are related to empowering sources, and this very easy empowering source is the internet, so that they already noticed when there was trouble, when they were in a negative mood, they fell back into structures that they used before, such structures as internet use. That's another part of participants that with a very low online craving and very low offline engagement, they were just bored, and the internet is there, they are searching for information, viewing some videos, stuff. Not that part of participants that's that addicted. But now we are going to those that have this addicted position. And I'm going to read the last sentence. Well, on the internet, I would say happy, addicted to music, all in all addicted to the internet with everything that goes with it. And here we have a very concise position about this. It's about emotion, about empowerment, and if there's lack of offline empowerment, then likelihood is getting much more increased of getting addiction and falling into these sources of online empowerment. And this cycle, the longer this cycle does go on, the stronger this reinforcement gets, and participant is getting into situations where he's not able to cut his internet consumption down. Well, what I want to close with is this last sentence. It's from a book from 1966. The world of everyday life is not only taken for granted as a reality by the ordinary members of society in the subjectively meaningful conduct of their lives, it is a world that originates in their thoughts and actions, and it's maintained as real by this. And that's something that we really should have in our mind when we are doing research on minors all over the world in regard to the internet, because in their thoughts, it's not two different worlds, it's one world. And it's the same for us if we think about it. It doesn't matter if we are a digital native, immigrant, or transformer. Thank you.